how are you? How are you in this world of ours today?
I'm actually very good. I'm in my apartment, and I was gonna try and show you a nice, beautiful window, but the light made it really bad. So now you get a view of my kitchen.
That's okay. You got a nice cutting board. I like your cutting board.
It's nice, yeah. I feel that cutting board is famous on Instagram.
Okay.
Instagram live video with it, and it was talked about.
Oh, that's good.
It serves me really well.
Yeah, and but so life is okay. Life is not too strange for you at the moment, because I assume your life has been, or your music has been impacted by everything that's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think everyone's been impacted in
Sure.
some way, no matter your job. For me, it's kind of meant that at a time where I was supposed to start touring again and be more like active out in the world playing my music, that has kind of been taken away, and I've had to kind of readjust, which has been interesting. But you learn something from everything, I guess, and I feel very fortunate to be here in Norway. It's I feel very safe here. I feel like we're well taken care of, and yeah, I feel like I can trust my government to make wise choices. So I'm happy. I have a nice apartment that I love being in, and I have, it's been okay.
But I should say it's an interesting time. Can you share one thing that you've discovered about yourself in this period?
That I've discovered about myself.
Or maybe in terms of how you approach music, because I can imagine having a moment like this is always a time of reflection in a way. At least it has been for me. So you look back at what you've done a little bit. I don't know if you have, but
like because of the time we're living in with the coronavirus.
Yeah, but well, also because life got forcibly slowed down in a way. You have time all of a sudden to think about these things.
That's true. Well, something I definitely have learned about myself, I think, is that up until, this thing happened, I've always been have had a very specific structure that I have for how I work. So I tend to only kind of do one thing at a time. I like tour, and then that's all I do. And then I write, and that's all I do. And then I record, and that's all I do. Although the writing and the recording, sometimes they go into each other a little bit, but I do feel like I really like separating it so that I can focus 100% on each thing. And usually when I have a release phase, that's all I focus on. But obviously things slowed down, and I ended up having, I think, 3 or 4 extra months. My album was supposed to come out at the end of April, and now it's the end of August. It's coming out this week. So I all of a sudden had all this like pocket of time that I hadn't planned for, which, in some ways has been really nice. I was able to confront that part of myself that only likes to do one thing at a time. And because I just had so much extra time. So I started doing some writing. I did some guitar lessons and tried to juggle some like more things at once while I was also preparing for the release. And I learned that I'm actually able to do that, which was nice.
That helps, yeah. So it wasn't overwhelming or anything.
It got overwhelming at the beginning of this month, and I realized I need to focus on the album now.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the music then, because I want to start way back when you first started writing songs. Do you remember what you were writing about when you first started writing songs?
Oh, what I was writing about? Probably, difficulties in love, I imagine. Okay. I think that's what it was. I started writing in my early to mid 20s.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's what was going on at the time.
Well, the reason I ask is because, especially the first song, but I sense the entire album has this overarching feeling of that idea of the tortured artist. And Were you aware of that? Because, well, you were relatively old or older when you were starting with writing in your early 20s. So were you aware of that kind of concept? And what did you think of it then?
I have never really thought about it that much, I think, until I came off of my last album campaign, my last touring stint back in 2017. So I released an album and then I toured quite extensively. And I toured a lot before then. And that album, and then the EP I released before that was quite like heartbreak sort of themed. And very sad, because that was what I was going through at the time that I wrote those records. So I think a lot of people assumed that I was just sad and tortured. And then I was met with that quite a few times when I met people out on the road, and I felt as if they were surprised that I seemed like a happy person. And then I started wondering if oh shit, do I have to be sad? Am I not meeting the criteria almost? And it became kind of a mind fuck for me, because at that time I was really happy and content with most parts of my life. So I was worried, like, oh, what's going to happen now? What am I going to write about? And so I wrote about that worry that I wasn't kind of meeting the criteria of the tortured artist.
What was your reaction? Did you kind of, this is going to sound weird, but try to seek out drama or seek out kind of?
No, I mean, while it was happening, or while I felt this, where I was met with this vibe, was while I was still touring, I think. And maybe, doing some press for that album. And I think at that time, I just got annoyed. I was just like, I don't know. It angered me a bit. But at the same time, I can understand where it comes from. If all that you see of someone is this pocket of like, simply put, sadness. I don't think that it's just sad, but that was this. The songs were often labeled as that, and I understand that. So I can understand that became what people thought. But at the same time, I think that there's so many things that go on in our lives, and as writers, or as a writer, at least for me, I tend to write about the difficult things or the frustrating things. There's just not that much that I find. I have a hard time writing about the really easy stuff. It's and I think that's true for many people, but I don't think that means that you have to be frustrated all the time or sad all the time.
No, because I hear this from artists every once in a while that one thing is that happens very often is people gravitate to the more darker things in life, because just simply because it's more interesting than, hey, everything's good. So that makes sense. But then what you mentioned as well in terms of sadness, I mean, there's so many layers to it. Like you said, there's melancholy, there's nostalgia, there's all these levels of looking back and going through certain times. Have you found that writing songs helps you make sense of kind of life and experiences that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, the foundation of it for me, is that it helps me sort out my head and my brain and and how I feel. And it's just this way of like, usually when I write about something, I don't really completely understand what it's about until later. That was true with this album. I didn't understand really the overarching theme until, way after I'd finished writing it, and it was done, the recording was done, and then I started realizing what was I writing about a lot. And so for me, it becomes a way to understand myself and my past and my present as well, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so with hindsight then, what Looking back, what were you going through? Or what have you found now that you were dealing with at that time of making the
album? This album that's coming out now.
Yes.
You mean? Yeah. Well, I think there's a big portion of that kind of the worry about having to be a suffering artist to make good art, which I don't believe. I don't think that that's true, but I was worried that that was true for a long time, and that seeps into a lot of the songs. Yep.
What changed your opinion then? Well, what made you confident in well, you don't need to be some drug addict and able to make beautiful art in a way?
I think I just realized that, you know, we feel so many things throughout even just a day or an hour. You can go through so many emotions, and I think we're so layered. And just because I sit down and write about one thing that is difficult, that isn't everything of my life, if that makes sense.
Sure,
so I've just realized that I've just come to terms with the fact that life definitely has to be up and down, and that you can't, if you expect to be happy all the time, you're not going to succeed, and you'll probably be less happy. So I think, this idea of kind of this wave that it keeps, it keeps coming, and I don't know.
And then can you name a couple of artists that have influenced you along the way, and maybe in particular on this record?
Well, I think for the recording, I definitely had some influences that I brought in. Really like Gregory Alan Isakov, both his songwriting and the way that his music is recorded. The production is beautiful, and there's a sense of space in it that I really love. It's like the song sounds so big, even though there's not necessarily that much going on. So that was a big influence for me sonically. I think writing wise, I wasn't really delving into anyone, you know, in particular more than others, but I was listening to music that I love. So obviously that would have seeped through. Again, Gregory Alan Isakov. I really like Anne Brun. I've been listening to her since before I started writing. Okay. I like Laura Marling, Aaron Ray. I mean, there's so many. Tallest Man on Earth, I really love. I'm sure I could mention so many. Those are the ones that kind of pop in my head right now.
You mentioned dynamics and kind of the way sound is used, and then were you looking for that specific sound to keep it very sparse and let the songs breathe and have these elements weave in and out of it, or is that something that kind of just occurs in the studio once you're there?
Well, I think for this particular record, I went into the studio I had a few references, and I said, I like this, but I really wanted everyone to be very creatively free. So I didn't want there to be like these intense guidelines of it has to sound like this. So I just sent my producer a list of songs that I liked and that I felt had a really good vibe that I enjoyed. And then I kind of said, but I want you to be free to do whatever you want. And at the end of the day, I can veto anything, you know. At the end of the day, it's my music. So, but I wanted Chris, the producer, and Bear, the engineer, to be able to just try whatever. And same for me, just try any stupid idea that you have, because often the stupid ideas aren't stupid at all. So I think at the end of the day, I mean, the record doesn't sound very sparse. I don't think there's a lot going on.
Well, but like you say, but it's well spaced out. It's not all at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because for me, a good example was Island, where there are enough layers and there's all kinds of things going on, but it's not just one thing I don't like about modern music is it's overproduced in a way, and the way this record was produced is you still have a lot of those elements, but not all at once, you know. So that's kind of what I meant by sparse.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Thank you.
No, but when you're working in the studio on something like that, and you say you give everybody freedom. For instance, if you talk about strings, then there's some strings on a couple of songs, and then
Yeah.
how do you figure out how you use strings and how to use it to complement what your voice and your playing is doing?
Well, for this record, in the past, I've always used string sections and had like pre-written arrangements. It's always been quite specific. Whereas for this, I have a really good friend who's a fiddle player here, and she's played with me a lot in the past. And she also plays traditional Norwegian fiddle. It's called a hardingfele, and it has sympathetic strings, so it's very emotional. It's very charged, and I think it's one of my favorite instruments. And so I just wanted to bring her in. It was very when I'm in the studio, I'm very particular about who gets to come in through the door. So it was basically me and Chris and Bear for most of it, and then Sophia, my friend, came in for I think 3 days, and I just let her go a bit wild. And it was mostly her and the producer Chris kind of going back and forth and arranging the strings. And I don't remember if I like gave that many pointers. I think I would come in and just be like, I like that part, use that one, and kind of. But I wanted to again give them freedom and give her freedom, because I think it's so easy to feel like you're in this box when you're trying to be creative, especially on someone else's music. I imagine that it can be a bit stressful because you don't want to do something that the artist doesn't like. But obviously, if you have complete freedom to try whatever you want, I think it can be more interesting.
Sure. Can I assume then, when you're working on an album like this, that that the live shows are something completely different in a way? Or
well, I guess now what's hard now is that we haven't really been able to play it live.
Well, fair enough, yeah.
Yeah, but I think I like to think of the live side as, I mean, it's impossible to make it sound exactly like the recording anyway. And I think that can get a bit boring for the band to just tell them that, oh, you have to play it exactly like this. I want it to sound similar enough that the audience, can recognize the elements that they've listened to before they come see the show. But also I really want people to have that, again, creative freedom. So that they can have more fun with it. So there's definitely a big element of that in my band, because no one in the band at the moment played on the record.
Okay. So that's something for the future. You still have to figure that out once we are able to play live again.
I mean, we've been rehearsing with social distancing and everything, and we've got a couple of things coming up, like some press things and such. So we've been working on it for a while. And then I think the touring's going to happen, like the bigger touring's going to happen next year, hopefully.
Sure. Hopefully, yeah. We don't know yet, but
we don't know, but hopefully, yeah.
There's one other kind of concept that I'd like to talk to you about, which is more in well. I wrote down because I know you don't like to explain songs too much. And I wrote down lines, so we don't have to get into this too much. But there's a line here. My line: "She will know all you'll ever know from me," and I think it's in on Island. That song.
Did I get exactly what line you said?
Oh, hear my lines, and you will know all you'll ever know from of me. So I was just wondering about that line. Where did that line come from?
I think that line came from feeling a couple of times, like most interviews that I do, I feel it feels great and I feel fine. But a couple of times I've felt it almost like a little bit invaded. My privacy has felt a bit, it's felt a bit intense. And I think that line for me, or that chorus, is kind of a saying that, because when you write, especially for me, I write about my own life and what I'm going through most of the time. So it feels like I'm kind of handing over so much already in the lyric, in the music. It's very bare and quite intense to do that. And so then when there's very intense questions on top of that about your personal life and such, it's sometimes definitely depending on the questions, it can feel a bit intense and invasive. And so that's kind of where that came from. I think I was just frustrated.
and because I can imagine it's one of those things also, the whole reason why you write songs is because it's probably easier to express it that way than to put it into kind of straight lines or normal talk.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of my way of explaining how I feel.
But it's interesting what you mentioned. So when you first started writing songs and performing them, was that a difficult step to make? Like you say, it is very vulnerable, and you're kind of putting yourself out there. Was that a difficult thing for you to do?
Oddly, no, I don't think so. I think when it's put into music, it feels okay. I think it's the minute you have to kind of overly explain that it can feel uncomfortable, because it's so hard to explain it better than the song does. And if you over explain something, maybe you ruin someone's experience of the song.
Have you had that? Well, I personally, I don't care what the artists themselves think of the song. I have my own interpretation, and I just stick to that one. But have you had that with songs, where songs were kind of ruined for you, or for instance, where you thought it was about something and then it wasn't, or maybe even in your own songs where you thought it was about something and then, like you say, maybe a couple months later you think, oh, it's about something totally else.
I mean, I think I've definitely read about songs and been like, oh, really? That's what it's about? Huh? I never would have thought. And then you're almost like disappointed that you didn't get it. Because you have such an idea of what a song is about, and then you hear that it's about something completely different. It can be a bit like, oh, I thought I understood. But I mean, sometimes I think it's really interesting, and I wouldn't say that I'm completely shut off to talking about what the songs are about. Definitely not. I think I was more in the past, because it was personal in a different way, and I felt more uncomfortable.
Well, is it? Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Is it fair to say, like you said, the previous album was more about relationships and the kind of something you went through? And is it fair to say maybe that this record is more about general concepts? You talk about anxiety in a couple of songs, and kind of. So is it more about kind of general things that people struggle with in this modern life?
Maybe, yeah. I think in some ways, yeah. I think I did write quite a bit about anxiety and nerves and how that affects me. And, you know, I didn't really realize that it was anxiety until about like under a year ago. So I had written the album and recorded it before I understood that was what I was going through. I thought I was just felt a bit scared sometimes or whatever. I just I didn't have a label for it. And so I think in that sense, I think a lot of people have that kind of murmur inside of them, this anxious feeling that it's not maybe so extreme that you immediately understand what it is. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, me included. And it's hard when you don't know what it is. It's become a lot easier for me now that I know. I can label it and I'm not so afraid of it. But then on the other side, I'm writing a lot about kind of my experience being an artist, which I feel like is quite navel gazing and maybe not so universal. But, you know, I always just write about my experience, and that's all I can do, really.
But I think it's also talking about music and songwriting and thinking about that. It's just like everybody else. It's like you say, it's what you're dealing with, but also it helps you understand, I suppose, your craft better, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it does help me understand my craft better, and I think the process of writing this record, it's helped me, separate myself a little bit more and understand that, even though I wrote a really sad song one day, it doesn't mean that I am sad all the time. And it doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be so extreme. It's really just like a little time capsule, and you can go into it, and for the 3.5 or 4 minutes that the song lasts, you're in that emotion that you were writing about. But it doesn't mean that you have to hold on to that feeling forever.
Right, and that's kind of making our way then to the album title, Temporary Soothing. And now there's a number of ways to look at the world. One of them is, which I unfortunately subscribe to at times, is that life is one big tragedy with kind of happy moments in between.
Right,
so that's in terms of this title, that makes kind of you have that soothing moment, but then you go back to the other part. When did this title pop up for you?
Well, I always find album titles really hard. I think it's so hard to find that one line or word or whatever that fits the entire record, because a record is usually not just about one thing. It does have an arc of emotion and an arc of themes. So I find that really hard because I really want the title to be able to represent every song. So what I usually do is that I go through all of the lyrics of every song on an album, and I pick out all the ones that I like, and then I put them up against every song and see if I think it fits. I probably spend way too much time and energy on that, but it's really important to me. So I did that with this record, and this line popped out in the song Only Life. There's a line called, a line that says, "It's a hollow float, temporary soothing." And in that song, it's a negative, I think, or it's it's a darker meaning of someone using whatever it is, drinks, drugs, caffeine even, or something to kind of numb pain. And it becomes it's a temporary soothing. And obviously you have to go back to your real life and what's going on eventually. But I think that for the record as a whole, I think of it as a more positive thing. It's that thing of there's always light at the end of the tunnel, but you can't expect to get to the light and just be like swimming in sunshine for the rest of your life. If you expect that, you're going to fail.
Well, what I like about it is, especially in contrast to a lot of what's I suppose social media culture is, where you just keep on presenting the best moments of kind of this is my excellent life. It's also realizing that, well, you can have those moments, that's fine, that's perfect, but that's not all the time in a way.
Exactly.
So you have to be realistic a little bit.
Be realistic about.
Go ahead.
You have to be realistic about your search for happiness. It's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel happy, and everything in between.
Well, that's an important thing, because I at times think, and I've had conversations with artists about this, where certain legitimate emotions are kind of shied away from when it's just a normal human emotion. Because there's nothing wrong with feeling sad when you're sad. There's nothing wrong with feeling happy when you're happy. It's legitimate kind of human. Yeah. So it's interesting that people kind of try to duck away from certain feelings or emotions.
Yeah,
Final
I think.
Question. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say that I think there's a lot of fear about feeling sad. I think, at least for me, I was kind of afraid of it, or afraid of feeling afraid, and trying to shy away from it and expecting to be happy more, and always striving for better in every way. And I think now I have come to terms with the fact that it's all kind of goes up and down, and that's fine. And it makes me able to enjoy the really great moments more, and also not feel so incredibly frustrated in the moments where I don't feel as great.
Final thought about this then, is that kind of the the plight of an artist, and I'm sure it's true for most professions in a way, but for an artist, because you're putting yourself out there for the world to judge in a way, and then you're also, I don't know if people have expectations, but you want to go, so you want to be able to play for people, and you want people to show up and like it. So is there kind of almost an inherent anxiety attached to the life of an artist?
Oh God, yeah. For me, definitely.
Mm.
I think it's really. I know that at the end of the day, all I can do is write the music that I write and record it, and as long as I'm happy with it, that that's all I can do. But it's hard because I think everyone wants to be liked.
Mm.
I want to be successful so that I can keep doing my job. It's very important to me because I want to do this full time. It's very important to me. So there's this pressure, I guess, to make something that people will like. But I think at the end of the day, making something authentic is more likely to be liked anyway.
Right.
So
that's what you hear by artists all over, saying, well, I struggled for years, and then once the moment came where they started thinking, well, fuck it, I'm just going to do what makes me happy, that's when their career started taking off and stuff. So you see that a lot.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But I think no matter what, it's always like you want those good reviews, and you want,
of course,
you want those, no matter how much we say that we don't care. I think that at least I care.
And then it's one of those things as well where in terms of comments and people having their opinions, 100 people can say, "Oh, you're the greatest, I love you," and then one person says, "Ah, shit," and then it fucks your day is ruined,
Yeah.
And so now that luckily. Well, that's why I'm saying, when you're an artist, you kind of almost put yourself out there to be just like, nobody has an opinion on me in a way. So that's very comfortable in a way.
Yeah, it is kind of like, it's intense when you release something, because you know that I think that there's no way that everyone's going to like what you do.
Right.
There's no way. So you have to try to be okay with that. But it's, it's definitely, I have to keep reminding myself to remember, oh, you really like this album. You really like this music that you've made and put out. And that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Who cares if everybody loves it if you don't?
Exactly.
I think that would be worse.
That would be. I sometimes wonder that with the really, really big artists, whether they even like their own music. I've no answer to that, but that's something I don't wonder at times.
I don't know.
Last question then, because you're home a lot in this time. Your album is done. I'm sure you're quite busy with, like you said, you're gearing up towards the release and all that stuff. You've been playing guitar. Have you written new songs already?
Yeah, I have, because I had all this extra time. I haven't written as much as I would have hoped. I kind of had this idea that I would write a whole new record and be ready. But that's a pipe dream. But I was able to explore co-writing for the first time, which was really interesting. It's something that I've shied away from a lot. But I've been really enjoying doing that, trying it out and see, you get something different when you have another person there with you when you're writing. So
why did you shy away from it?
I think because I've always had this strong need. If it's a song for me, I think I'm quite opinionated, but I'm not so good at letting people know if I don't like something. So I tend to, I've in the past done some co-writes and then realized that even though the song that we come up with is good, I'm never going to use it because it doesn't feel like me.
Right.
And then it felt a bit pointless and like I'm wasting people's time. But so I've been trying to learn how to be a bit more assertive and make it known if I don't feel like it's becoming a song for me. At the same time, I've in this time done some co-writing that's not been for me. So that's been really interesting and that's really fun when you get to kind of try to shape someone else's ideas and make a song for them, and the pressure is so off, because it's not for me.
Is it difficult in these times to not let kind of the whole lockdown and everything that's happening in the world seep into the songs?
I'm sure it will. It hasn't for me just yet. I think for me it takes quite a while to process things.
Okay. So
I write in retrospect a lot. And because I've been so fortunate to be here, I feel so lucky. I think that it could have been so much worse. And it is bad for a lot of people, definitely. And that's why I feel so grateful that I've had such a good experience, all things considered. And so that helps me not become grumpy about it.
Fair enough. One last thing I have to ask is what, once this album is out in a couple of weeks, what do you hope people will hear in it?
A temporary soothing.
Fair enough.
That's what I hope. That's what I really, really want it to be. I feel like music is like, it sounds so cheesy, but it's like the one thing that I can offer to help people. It's like that's the thing that I do. And so especially at this time when so many people are having such a hard time, I'm hoping that, it's gonna give someone like a 40-minute break, or even just a 3-minute break if they just listen to one song, to just feel something.
Excellent. Siv, Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So nice to chat to you.
Oh yeah, you too.